Hey guys, welcome to this new video. In today's video, I want to make an update and I want to invite Philippe Anh that you may have seen on the channel maybe a year or a year half ago to talk about his startup, Homebase. They are providing home financing for expat VQ locals here in Vietnam, and I want to get your thoughts about the real estate market here as well as the updates from your startup. Thanks, Philippe, to come today. It's a pleasure for me to have you.
Awesome. I'm glad to be here.
Can you maybe start by reintroducing yourself for people who didn't check the previous video?
Yeah, of course. So hi everyone. My name is Philip and I'm one of the co-founders of Homebase. What we do here at Homebase is we make home ownership accessible for anyone in Vietnam, whether it be, a foreign investor who is based overseas or also someone who's actually based in Vietnam who's a local investor as well, right? It's been a pretty crazy journey, I would say, over the past 2 or 3 years, because when we first talked, the real estate market was one state and now, completely different because of COVID. Glad to be here and, glad to share a little bit more about the insights.
Okay, thanks, Philippe. So basically, can you give us a wrap up about what was the situation here about the real estate in 2021 in Vietnam, especially in Ho Chi Minh City?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it's been a pretty crazy year for everyone, right? I would say that for the viewers don't know, Vietnam actually experienced a little bit later of a COVID wave than Europe or the US, right? Where in the early part of 2020 and 2021, everything was doing very well in Vietnam, and then we had a kind of another wave hit, and during that time, especially in Ho Chi Minh City, it was quite intense because you couldn't go out, right? And I'm sure you remember you couldn't go out for groceries or go out for food even. So that definitely affected the economy and also the real estate market a lot, right? But I think what's really interesting is that there's been a lot of studies done about the actual economic impact of what happened, right? And I do recall there's a study by CBRE, which is a pretty big multinational company, that said even during the pandemic, even during this last wave of COVID, real estate prices still went up around 3 to 8%, which is pretty insane if you think about it, right? Because almost every other sector or every other country were dramatically affected, yet real estate showed a certain amount of resiliency in the market as well. Yeah.
Okay, but I guess probably some specific districts, right? Especially like big cities, specific projects. I did also took some step and invested in lands in Vietnam in 2020 and 2021, and also being able, to put aggressive offers to people who were in the need of selling. How was your perspective about this? Did the market was still kind of struggling sometime in terms of specific, verticals lands or commercial lands or rental areas?
I think it's a good kind of question that you mentioned, especially land, right? Because I'm not sure if you saw in the news, but 2 weeks ago, there was one plot of land in Tu Thiem, which is a very key aspect of District 2 that sold just around for $1 million USD per square meter, which is absolutely insane, right? Because it's actually, people think it's higher than in a lot of prices in Hong Kong and Singapore and all of these, and especially after COVID, right? But I do think that that's why kind of people are very optimistic about property here in Vietnam, because we're still developing in a very rapid pace across the country, and when you take an asset like land, right, it's very limited in Ho Chi Minh City, right? There's only a certain amount of land, so I think that's why investors really do believe that there's a high level of appreciation there. In terms of how the business affected us as a company, I mean, tons, right? Because you can imagine where you transition from a market where everyone's buying, it's very hot, and there's a lot of optimism about the market, to suddenly where you can't even go out, you can't even transact any property transactions. Everything, of course, will be different, right? So a lot of what we did actually during that time was we actually had to talk back to our customers, right? We had to talk back to the people who are in this market and really understand, what do they need? What do they want, right? And that's actually why we had launched, one or two other products actually in that time, in the COVID time, especially one where it's called Sell the Homebase, where basically, instead of investors buying, some investors now want to sell, right? They want liquidity because they want to free up their assets. They want to use that to pay for the business or buy food or whatever it is, right? So, we launched a service that allowed, anyone to basically be able to sell their assets to us in a matter of days instead of months, right? And then get their money really, really fast and provide that immediate liquidity, right? And this is a very common service in the US in models like Opendoor or other companies, but it's the first time that everyone, anyone has been doing this in Vietnam and Southeast Asia.
Okay, so in terms of feedback from the market, what was specifically the districts of the condominium that you managed to kind of buy from investors?
I would say that, throughout a lot of districts and a lot of these different types of asset classes, there was, broader investor interest, right? Or broader, interest to sell, right? Because I think the pandemic was quite serious and it did affect everyone, right? But I would say that, we saw a lot more demand from people who maybe had been investors, right? Who in the past 3 or 4 years, they saw the property prices double. And now this is an opportunity for them to get out, right? Get out of the market, get their cash. We also saw a pretty significant demand from foreign investors, right? Because, in Vietnam, I'm not sure if your viewers know, in order to transact a property, right, you actually have to come here, sign the papers in person in blue ink at the bottom of every single page, right? And without that, you can't actually do anything, right? So what we offered, especially these foreign investors who maybe they weren't so willing to deal with this, uncertainty and instability, right, is a way out, right? And we would solve the entire process for them. They would get their money, they would get their investment back, and everyone leaves happier at the end of the day.
Okay.
Yeah.
So basically, what we heard from the news, there were basically 4 months of very heavy lockdown here. Many people were not very comfortable about the hope for Vietnamese economy.
Yeah.
What are your personal thoughts? Are you like bearish or bullish for Vietnam economy in general, not only real estate markets?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And, a lot of our customers, right, especially foreign investors, they ask us the same question about where is Vietnam's economy headed? Should I dive back into the real estate market, right? Is it going to be resilient enough to stand other shocks, right? And if we look at the market and we talk to people around, I think generally we're still pretty bullish about it, right? The reason is because I would say that Vietnam's economy still remains very, very resilient and very strong, right? Even after COVID, you see a lot of like foreign directed investments. So overseas companies from Korea, from Japan, from France even, investing a lot in Vietnam, right? And it's across every single sector, right? Industrial, manufacturing. There's more and more manufacturing actually moving to Vietnam from countries like China, right? Where historically, a lot of the manufacturing has been improved as well. So I would say that, although maybe levels are not as, hot as maybe before COVID, 2-3 years ago, we still see a lot of optimism in the market, right? And I think even now, right, in terms of our existing customer base and inquiries, we see more and more people and returning actually to levels that were pre-pandemic as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. So you mentioned the landed area for manufacturing.
Yes.
We had a lot around Saigon, Binh Nhung, Long An, Dong Nai province as well. For a foreign investor who want to acquire land in Vietnam, how things work basically? We're going to make actually a video about this that's going to go really deep in detail about this, but I just wanted to have your thoughts about that.
Yeah, exactly. I would say that there's still a lot of hurdles traditionally for a foreign investor to be able to buy land specifically as an asset. The reason is because there's actually some legal limitations on foreigners being able to own land, right? So unless you're, for example, a Vietnamese citizen, or maybe a Viet Kieu, which is an overseas Vietnamese, or have some other kind of notable exceptions, most likely it will be very, very difficult for you as a person to be able to own land, right? And so historically, I would say that there's been several ways that people have employed. For example, in some cases, maybe if you are married to a Vietnamese partner, or a spouse, or you have a Vietnamese friend, they're able to acquire it on your behalf. There's other services like law firms that, for example, will hold the title for you, right? And I would say lastly, that's also where Homebase comes in, where we can also help advise and structure a way for you to be able to acquire land and make those lucrative gains in the future as well.
Okay, interesting, Philippe. So basically, can you introduce us a little bit? What's the service you are providing inside Homebase? What are your kind of customer you are targeting?
Yes, yeah. So really great question. So at Homebase, we have two main services, right? One service is, we call it buy with installment, right? Basically what it is it's a more flexible and easier to use or easier to qualify alternative to traditional mortgage financing in Vietnam. And the core problem that we're trying to solve here is that a lot of people, including maybe yourself, including people who are entrepreneurs who have unstable income or low savings, they don't qualify for bank loans in Vietnam. And, we talk a little bit more about how prices are increasing a lot. There's a lot of appreciation, right? But a subset or a consequence of that is that now property is also harder and harder to afford because it's very expensive, right? So a lot of people maybe don't have enough cash savings to be able to buy out in cash, right? So, for a lot of these foreign investors or for a lot of these entrepreneurs in Vietnam, they're just unable to access the property market, right? And to give your viewers a sense, right, even if you can, right, a lot of these mortgages are very interestingly structured. So maybe LTVs here in Vietnam are, around 70%. Interest rates are high as 12 or 13% a year, which is very, very high compared to a country like France, for example, right? So that's where Homebase comes in, basically, right? And how we work is like this, right? You, as a customer, you pick any property you want. Could be apartment, could be land, could be landed property, almost anywhere. We've helped customers in Ho Chi Minh City, in Da Nang, in Hoi An, almost anywhere in Vietnam, right? After you pick a property, or we can actually recommend an agent for you, we actually will evaluate it. Right? We'll say, is this property safe? Is it okay to buy? Are you buying at a good price, right? So we'll put our advice, right? If everything is okay, we'll actually buy it for you upfront, okay? So we'll buy it for you, and even from day one, you can actually move in it, you can rent it out, you can renovate, you can make it nice, you can grow a farm, whatever you want, right? And in the beginning, we just ask you to put a small amount of deposit on the property, but we pre-agree from day one that you'll buy us out of this property at a slightly higher price, right? So maybe we buy this property at 5 billion, and then we pre-agree that you buy it back from us at 6 billion. 3 years later, right? And every single month, all you do is deposit more and more and more and more towards that 6 billion price. You can deposit 6 billion anytime, it's yours, right? We transfer it back to you. Or if you want to walk away anytime, we just sell the property and give you your deposit back. So that's how Homebase works. That's how our buy with installment plan works. Yeah.
And now you have also the sell to Homebase.
Exactly. Exactly.
During COVID?
Yes. Sell to Homebase is our new kind of program that we launched during COVID. And again, it's very, very intuitive and very easy to understand. Again, if you're, let's say, an owner of an asset, let's say land or apartment in Vietnam, and you want to sell it, and you don't want to go through the very long legal process, finding an agent, showing people around, especially during COVID, right? You basically tell us about your property. We'll give you an offer on the property. And then if you agree with the offer, we'll give you cash and sell it within 3 days.
And I heard also you had some exciting news very recently. You raised around 30 million, right? USD to basically expand Homebase here, your presence here, or as well as in Southeast Asia.
Yes. Yes.
Can you share us about that?
Yeah, we definitely, we're very excited to recently have announced this news about this 30 million fundraising round from pretty top leading global investors, including Goodwater Capital, Partech Ventures in Europe, Y Combinator, and several very strategic angel investors, including Michael Seibo, who's the CEO of YC, and some other operators from really big kind of prop tech companies around the world. And I think a lot of it is kind of goes to show that there's actually more and more interest, not only in the real estate investment space, but also in the venture capital and private equity space in Vietnam and in Southeast Asia. And I think for us, this is a kind of a first step. We're still getting started. And I think with this funding, we're able to help more and more customers, both domestically and overseas, be able to buy and afford their dream home in Vietnam and kind of scale our solutions going forward. And yeah, as you correctly mentioned, our ambition from day one is that we want to be a Southeast Asia regional company. So we have a lot of things to do, and we're quite excited about the future of Homebase as well.
Okay, cool, right. Philippe. But let's follow up in 1 year maybe and check a little bit how Homebase is going to grow and expand to all Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Always a pleasure to meet you.
Awesome, man.
You will find everything in the description. Check in the description, we put some links. So if you want to reach out Philippe or check a little bit more about Homebase products, you have everything below. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up if you enjoy the video, and I see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.
And I'ma get it right, dead on sight like